All right, today we're diving into something pretty incredible: how AI is starting to change the game in one of the most high stakes areas of medicine out there: organ transplants. We're talking about using code to literally help give people a new life. So let's get right into it. So, just to get a sense of the scale here, look at this number: over 48,000. In 2024, for the very first time, that's how many organ transplants happened in the US alone. I mean, that's not just a statistic, right? Each one of those is a person, a family, a life totally transformed. The science and logistics to even make that happen are just mind boggling. And that brings us to the big, central question we're tackling today. What if? What if you can know if a transplant was going to work before the surgery even starts? I know, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but this isn't some far-off fantasy. It's the exact problem that researchers are using AI to solve as we speak. Okay, so before we can really appreciate just how much of a game changer AI is here, we gotta pull back the curtain a little bit. We need to understand the massive, massive challenges that doctors are up against every single day. Because, a successful transplant is so much more than just what happens in the operating room. I mean, forget just the logistics of getting an organ from point A to point B. The real battle is biological. First, you've got graft rejection. That's where the patient's own body sees this new life-saving organ and, well, it attacks it. It's the body's defense mechanism gone wrong. And to stop that, doctors use immunosuppressant drugs. But that's a whole other balancing act, right? You need just enough to protect the new organ, but not so much that you weaken the patient's immune system to a dangerous level. It's like walking a tightrope, and every single step is this incredibly complex, high-stakes puzzle. And this is exactly where AI steps in. Now, it's really, really important to get this straight. This is not about robots replacing doctors. Not at all. Think of it as giving doctors a brand new superpower: the ability to see hidden patterns and make predictions from massive amounts of data that, honestly, no human brain could ever process on its own. AI in medicine isn't some brand new thing that just appeared overnight. The journey actually started way back in the 1970s with these early expert systems. Think of them as fancy diagnostic flowcharts. Then you fast forward to 2018, a huge milestone, when the FDA approved its very first AI for medical screening. So bringing this technology into a field as complex as organ transplantation, well, it's the next big and frankly revolutionary step in that evolution. So the specific type of AI we're mostly talking about here is called machine learning. And that analogy of a superpowered assistant, it's perfect. Imagine you could hire an assistant that could read, understand, and remember the medical records of 1 million transplant patients. It could then sift through all that information to find tiny, almost invisible patterns that tell you which donor organ would be the absolute best match for your one patient. That's what machine learning does. It learns from the data and finds connections that a human doctor, no matter how brilliant, might just miss. So that all sounds great in theory, but who's actually doing the work? Who's leading this charge? Well, to figure that out, we're going to look at a recent study of studies. It's called a bibliometric analysis, which is a fancy way of saying someone analyzed all the research papers out there to create a map of this global revolution. And what it shows is pretty fascinating. And when you look at that map, the data paints a really clear picture. The United States is, well, it's the undisputed leader here. We're talking over 42% of all the research publications in this space. That's almost half. And it makes sense, right? It's likely driven by a combination of research funding and access to massive medical datasets. But it's not a one-country show. You see China and Canada right up there too, proving that this is absolutely a global effort. And if we drill down even deeper, from the country level to the institutional level, is there one place that stands out? Oh yeah, the Mayo Clinic. With more than 150 papers published on this topic, they've really become the global epicenter for this specific groundbreaking research. Okay, this chart is actually super interesting because of how logical it is. It shows where the research attention is going. And look, the kidney is at the top, with over 43% of the studies focused on it. Why? Because it's the most transplanted organ in the real world. The science is following the need. And you see the same pattern for liver, heart, and lungs. The research priorities are mirroring clinical reality, which is exactly what you want to see. All right, so we've seen the 30,000-foot view, who's doing the research, and where it's happening. But let's bring it all the way down to the ground level, to what actually matters most. How does this technology help a real patient? What does it actually do for them? Okay, this might look a little complicated, but it's actually an amazing visual. It's called a Sankey diagram, and you can just think of it as a roadmap for all the research we've been talking about. It shows you the flow, right? From the year the study was done on the left, through which organ they were studying, which AI tool they used, all the way to the real-world goal on the right. Things like, helping the transplant last longer. So let's just follow one of these rivers to see how it works. See this big one here? It shows us that in 2024, a whole bunch of research focused on the kidney. And it flowed over to using machine learning. For what purpose? To predict graft survival. In other words, using AI to try and figure out how long that new kidney is going to last in the patient's body. The diagram just makes these connections pop.
So, when you boil it all down, what's the payoff? Well, it's huge. We're talking about building AI tools that can predict if a transplant is at risk of failing way earlier than we can now. They can figure out the perfect, personalized dose of anti-rejection meds for each patient. They can even analyze biopsies, looking for signs of rejection with incredible consistency. And of course, it all starts with finding the absolute best donor match in the first place. These are real, tangible improvements.
Now, all of this sounds amazing, right? Almost like a magic bullet. And the potential truly is incredible. But, and you knew there was a but, like with any powerful new tech, the path forward isn't perfectly smooth. There's a lot of promise, but there are also some serious hurdles to clear. On the one hand, the promise is just huge. Better matches, fewer organ rejections, truly personalized medicine, it all leads to better outcomes and more lives saved. But then you have the other side of the coin. We have to worry about things like algorithmic bias, making sure the AI doesn't perpetuate existing health inequities. Data privacy is a massive concern. And as we'll see, there are huge geographic gaps in who's even developing this tech. And above all, every single one of these tools has to be rigorously tested and validated in the real world before it can be used on patients. And this quote from the study really hammers that last point home. It's a bit of a sobering reality check. It says, the USA leads, whereas Latin America contributes less than 3%. Just think about that gap for a second. Over 42% of the research is coming from one country, while an entire continent contributes less than 3%. Making sure that the benefits of this amazing technology reach everyone, everywhere, well, that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. So that leaves us with one final really powerful thought to chew on. We've said it before, AI is not going to replace doctors, but will the doctors who use AI eventually replace the ones who don't? It really reframes the whole conversation. It's not about man versus machine. It's about the professional of the future and what tools they'll need to have in their toolkit to provide the very best care.